Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Let's turn back to matters at the state capitol. There are just a few days left before the state budget deadline, and it appears as if one major item, congestion pricing, has cleared a big hurdle this week, with Speaker Carl Heastie saying that the state assembly is ready to move forward on the issue. But as we know, with everything in Albany, anything can change at the last minute until the final deal is signed. My next guest has been vocal about her concerns over the proposal for the plan that would charge drivers to enter much of Manhattan. Joining us now from our bureau at the State House is Assemblywoman Rodneyse Bichotte. She's a Democrat, and her district in Brooklyn covers parts of Flatbush and Midwood. Welcome, and thanks for being with us, Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Grace, for having me.
So I know over the weekend you were standing with opponents of congestion pricing. A lot of movement over the last few days up in Albany, and I want to know where you stand right now on this idea.
Okay, first of all, I would just like to say, as I mentioned before, I was against congestion pricing in its form that it was proposed to the Assembly and the State Senate. My concern revolved around the accountability and transparency, and making sure that the funding actually raised in these congestion pricing would actually go to fixing the MTA, the public transportation. And so that was a concern of mine, and I did not want this to be just another way of generating revenue from, especially from working class and low-income residents of New York City. So we were out there pretty much protesting against the congestion pricing in its current form. We totally understand that there is a congestion issue, an environmental issue. We understand that fixing the MTA has been a concern, a priority for all of my constituents and residents across New York City. We certainly are in tune that we need to find a way to move New Yorkers more efficiently, but disparities in the past have caused more cars like ride sharing, dollar vans, dollar cabs to cause this problem, in addition to the increase in population.
So, Assemblywoman, I guess I want to know if your concerns have been addressed at all in the last few days. Do you feel any differently? You were speaking about your concerns, but using past tense verbs. I'm wondering if you've reached a different point, or if you still have the same concerns that you had over the weekend.
Right. So many of my concerns were addressed. I did meet with Pat Foy, who's the president of MTA today. I really appreciate the sit-down that we had. I've been speaking with Speaker Carl Heastie, who's been listening to all of our concerns in the Assembly conference. And some of the things in terms of accountability and transparency has been addressed, in terms of putting a panel together. Where the money will be going to. It will be going into a lockbox. Obviously, it might be unsecured or secured with bonding. And in terms of who would be exempt from this charge, I was concerned about seniors, members with disability in our community. I was also concerned about low income. There is an exemption we're talking about an exemption for low income. We don't know what that is. Right now, I know there's a talk about $60,000 or less. We do have low-income members who have a family of 8 or 7, and what happens to those who make $70,000 or $80,000? We are also talking about medical visits, those who have to get into the CBD to actually drive through to get to their medical appointments.
And Assemblywoman, sorry to interject for a minute, but is your understanding that those exemptions, that level of specificity, will be written into this budget agreement if it does indeed include congestion pricing, or are those questions that you're being told will be addressed at a later time when all of this gets ironed out and at a more granular level?
We are told, yes, we are told that these things are going to be addressed at a later time. Some of them will be in the language in the executive budget proposal. Yes.
And so do you...
We are also...
Yes, do you feel then, since it will be addressed down the road, or you're being told it will be addressed down the road, are you going to be voting or supporting this budget if it does indeed include congestion pricing? And are you going to have a hard time, do you think, going back to your district, because you had made it clear that many of your constituents had serious concerns about this proposal? Do you now have to go out and sell it to your constituents?
Well, many of my constituents were really concerned about this proposal because they didn't know what it did. They didn't know if the actual revenues were going to fix the subways. But I must say that I did propose that we need to revisit the millionaire's tax. That is something that can bring over $600 million, which will allow us to carve out and exempt more residents from getting charged. I did propose to revisiting the commuter tax, which if we increase it by 0.9%, it would generate about something like $2 billion that can be shared across all the transit system inside of New York City and the outer skirts. We also are discussing the peer-to-tier. That's something that I wanted pushed. I spoke to Senator Brad Hoylman, who's also pushing that. So we are looking at other forms of revenue because at the end of the day, we need the money now to actually implement the congestion pricing. That's going to be determined after 2020, and then we have to institute and implement the actual technology to do the tolling and so forth. We're not going to see the money immediately. And I know my residents who are concerned about fixing the public transportation want to see immediate results, which is why I had the initial concern. Mm-hmm.
Assemblywoman, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us about this. An evolution, I just want to point out to our viewers, just a few days ago, you were standing with opponents. Now you seem much more receptive to the idea of congestion pricing. Perhaps that is a change that we are seeing from some of your colleagues as well in the State Assembly. We thank you for taking some time to talk with us. Straight ahead, we will get some political wisdom on congestion pricing. Plus, we'll discuss the many choices facing top New York Democrats in Washington now that the Mueller investigation is concluded. I'll be joined by this week's Wise Guys and Gals. Stay with us.